It was a quiet afternoon in the small English town of Aston, the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and life moved at an easy pace. Ozzy Osbourne, now older and gentler than the wild rocker the world once knew, was driving back from a local charity visit. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange and gold. Everything seemed peaceful until he saw a little girl sprinting down the road, barefoot, her face streaked with soot and tears. She stumbled into the street, waving her arms desperately. "They burned my house down," she screamed, her voice cracking with panic. Ozzy hit the brakes and jumped out of the car. Nearby pedestrians froze, unsure what to do. The girl collapsed on the sidewalk, sobbing uncontrollably. Ozzy knelt beside her. Hey, it's all right, love. You're safe now. Tell me what happened." Between gasps, she pointed toward the hill. A thick column of black smoke curled into the evening sky. "My house? It's gone. They did it, they burned it." People started rushing from nearby shops, trying to see what was happening. Someone shouted, "Call the fire department." Another ran toward the smoke. Ozzy gently held the girl's hand, his eyes filled with concern. "Who did this?" he asked softly. The girl's lips trembled. "The boys from the next street. They said they were just playing. But then it caught fire." Ozzy felt his chest tighten. He glanced at the smoke, then back at the terrified child. This wasn't a random accident. This was cruelty. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks roared past, racing toward the burning home. Ozzy stood up, shielding the girl from the growing crowd. Whispers rippled through the people around them. "Wait, isn't that Ozzy Osbourne? What's he doing here?" But Ozzy didn't care about being recognized. His attention was locked on the child clutching his sleeve. Trembling, he looked back at the flames lighting up the horizon and muttered under his breath, "No kid should ever go through this." What Ozzy did next shocked the entire town. Ozzy Osbourne froze for a moment, staring at the little girl trembling in front of him. Tears streaked down her soot-stained cheeks. Her small hands shook as she pointed behind her, toward the thick black smoke curling into the sky. "My house. They burned it down," she cried again, her voice cracking under the weight of shock and fear. Without thinking, Ozzy sprang into action. "Come on, sweetheart. You're safe now," he said, scooping his jacket off and wrapping it around her shoulders. He turned to a shopkeeper nearby. "Call the fire department now." Within moments, sirens echoed through the small English town of Aston, Birmingham, the same place Ozzy had once called home. It felt like time had rewound, like he was back in the rough streets of his youth, where chaos and poverty were normal. But this time, he wasn't helpless. As the crowd gathered, whispers spread. "Wait, is that Ozzy Osbourne? What's he doing here? Is that little girl hurt?" Ozzy ignored the murmurs. His focus was on the child. "Who did this? Love. What happened?" he asked gently. Through sobs, the girl explained. "It was the boys from the alley. They always throw things at our windows. But today, they came with matches. I told my mom to run, but she's at work." Ozzy's face darkened, not with rage, with heartbreak. He'd seen cruelty before, but to hear it from an 8-year-old in his own hometown, that hit differently. The fire trucks screeched to a halt nearby. Firefighters rushed out, battling the growing flames that consumed a small brick house at the edge of town. The sky turned orange. The smell of smoke and burning wood filled the air. Ozzy guided the girl away from the chaos, toward the curb. He knelt beside her. "What's your name, darling?" "Ellie," she whispered. "Ellie," he repeated softly. "You're brave. You know that." People were filming now. Phones out, faces shocked, not because of Ozzy's fame, but because of how he was handling it. There was no rock star attitude, no arrogance. Just a man comforting a frightened child as her world burned behind her, as firefighters fought to control the flames. One of them shouted, "We've got it, surrounded." "But it's a total loss." The crowd gasped. Ellie's sobs deepened. She buried her face in Ozzy's jacket. Ozzy clenched his jaw, looked up at the fire, and muttered under his breath, "This ain't right. No kid should go through this." He looked around at the bystanders, the police arriving late, the people just watching instead of helping. His voice broke through the murmurs. "Don't just stand there. Someone call her mom. She needs to know what's happened." A woman from the crowd rushed forward, saying, "I know her mother. She works at the diner. I'll go get her," and ran off down the street. Ozzy looked back at the girl, still trembling beside him. He didn't know it yet, but this single moment, a rock legend kneeling in the ashes with a crying child, would soon move millions around the world. And as the firefighters finally brought the flames under control, Ellie whispered again, "Why would they do this? Mr. Ozzy." He swallowed hard. "Some people forget what it's like to feel," he said quietly, "but we're going to remind them." He placed a hand on her shoulder and looked toward the smoldering ruins. The reflection of the flames flickered in his eyes, not of anger, but of resolve. "Have you ever seen someone step up for a stranger? Comment below where you're watching from. Are you watching from the UK, USA, Philippines, India, or somewhere else in the world? Let's see where kindness still lives." The smell of smoke still hung heavy in the air. Fire trucks hissed as water sprayed over what was left of the small wooden house at the end of the lane. Ozzy stood there beside the little girl, one arm protectively around her shoulders. As she sobbed into his jacket, her name was Lila, barely 8 years old, trembling, covered in soot. her small backpack clutched tight to her chest. Ozzy crouched down to meet her eyes. Hey, sweetheart, what happened? She hiccuped between tears. They burned my house down, Mr. They laughed while it burned. Ozzy froze. He blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. Who did this? Those boys from school, she whispered. They said we don't belong here, that my mom's poor, and they threw something through the window. The words hit Ozzy like a gut punch. He looked toward the blackened shell of the home. The window shattered, the roof collapsed, toys melted into the ashes. A firefighter approached. Sir, are you family? Ozzy shook his head. No, just someone who stopped. The firefighter sighed. We got the flames out in time. No one was inside, but looks like arson. We'll need statements. Leela buried her face again. We lost everything, she whispered. My mom's at work. She doesn't even know yet. Ozzy's throat tightened. He'd seen chaos before, on stages, in crowds, even in his own life. But this was different. This was innocence destroyed. He looked around at the onlookers. Some were filming on their phones, whispering. Others murmuring half-hearted sympathy before walking away. Ozzy stood up sharply. Oi! Stop filming the poor girl. For God's sake. His voice thundered across the street. The crowd went silent. He took a deep breath, kneeling again beside Leela. You're safe now, okay? No one's going to hurt you again. I promise. Minutes later, a small car screeched to a halt nearby. A woman ran out, her uniform still on, face streaked with panic and tears. Lila, she screamed, rushing forward and wrapping the girl in her arms. Mom, it's gone. The little girl sobbed. Her mother's knees buckled as she looked at the smoking ruins. My God. Ozzy stepped back, letting them hold each other. He wiped his eyes behind his sunglasses. He turned to a police officer who was writing in a notepad. You're gonna catch whoever did this, right? The officer shrugged lightly. We'll investigate, but kids being kids? Sometimes these things. Ozzy's head snapped up. Kids being kids. That child's home is ashes, mate. The officer shifted uncomfortably. We just have to verify what happened first. Ozzy took a step closer. I've lived through chaos, officer. This isn't mischief. This is cruelty. The policeman cleared his throat and stepped away. Lila's mother looked up, tears streaming down her face. Sir, you don't have to get involved. We'll figure something out. Ozzy shook his head. You're not alone in this. He looked again at the house, a place that had once been a home, now nothing but smoke and memory. It reminded him of his own childhood in Birmingham. The hunger, the struggle, the feeling of being invisible. He turned back to Lila. You said they laughed. She nodded. Ozzy's jaw tightened. Then they need to learn what pain feels like. Not from violence, but from consequence. He pulled out his phone and made a quiet call. Sharon, love, I need your help. There's a little girl here. Her home's gone. We're not leaving her like this. The mother stared, shocked. Are you really Ozzy Osbourne? He smiled faintly. Sometimes, but right now, I'm just a bloke trying to help. As the sun began to set, the crowd thinned. Only the firefighters, the family, and Ozzy remained. He watched Leela clutch her mother's hand as they sat on the curb, their faces lit by the orange glow of dying embers. Ozzy stepped forward and said softly, Tomorrow, we start fixing this, together. The mother tried to protest. We can't afford, but Ozzy interrupted gently. Don't worry about that. Just get some rest tonight. He turned away before they could thank him, because he didn't do it for praise. He did it because he remembered what it was like to feel forgotten. As he walked back to his car, he looked once more at the burned home and whispered under his breath, No child deserves this. Not ever again. And in that quiet moment, Ozzy Osbourne, the rock legend, the wild man, made a silent promise that would shake the entire town. The fire had been extinguished, but the smell of smoke still hung in the air, thick, bitter, and heavy with heartbreak. The little girl clung to her mother's hand, both of them covered in soot, their eyes red from tears and smoke. The house, what used to be their home, was now a blackened skeleton of wood, and ash. Ozzy stood quietly, taking it all in. His usual rock star energy was gone. In its place stood a man, older, calmer, and deeply moved. The girl looked up at him with trembling lips. Sir, they laughed while it burned. The words hit Ozzy like a punch to the chest. He closed his eyes, remembering his own days growing up poor in Birmingham, hungry, cold, and invisible. He knew what it felt like to be powerless. He turned to the firefighters. Where's the family staying tonight? One of them shrugged. Red Cross might have a shelter spot, but it's pretty full. We'll see what we can do. Ozzy looked at the mother, exhausted, shaking, still trying to look strong for her daughter. What's your name, love? Clara, she whispered. And this is Emma. Ozzy nodded. All right, Clara, you're not sleeping in no shelter tonight. Not while I'm here. The mother blinked. I don't understand. Ozzy turned to his assistant, who had just arrived. Book them into the best hotel in town right now. Make sure they've got food, clothes, and whatever else they need. And tell the manager, Ozzy's covering it personally. Clara gasped. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Ozzy interrupted gently, because nobody else will. Reporters were starting to arrive now, cameras flashing. Someone shouted, Ozzy, what happened here? He raised a hand, shielding Clara and Emma from the lights. Don't film them, he said firmly. They've suffered enough. You want to film something? Film what we're gonna do next, to fix it. The cameras lowered. The crowd went silent. Ozzy crouched down beside little Emma, meeting her eyes. Listen, love, he said softly. You lost your house? Yeah, but you didn't lose everything. You've still got your mom. You've still got people who care. And I promise you we're gonna make this right. Emma sniffled, managing a small nod. Then Ozzy stood up, looking at the gathering townspeople, many of whom had been silent spectators earlier that day. His voice carried across the smoky air. You all saw what happened here. A family lost everything? And for what? Because someone thought it was funny. Because people turned away instead of stepping in? A few people lowered their heads in shame. I've made mistakes in my life, Ozzy continued, his voice cracking slightly. Plenty of them, but I learned one thing. When you see someone hurting, and you can help, you bloody help. Applause started slowly, from a few people in the back. Then it spread louder, stronger, until the whole street was clapping. Clara covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Why are you doing this for us? She asked through tears. Ozzy smiled faintly. Because once upon a time, someone helped me, and I never forgot. He turned to his assistant again. Also, get the builders on the phone. We're rebuilding this house properly, safe, warm, and we'll make sure Emma's got her own room this time. The little girl's eyes widened. Really, Ozzy said, grinning, and you're helping me design it. The crowd laughed softly. Even the firefighters smiled for the first time that night as the news crews packed up. A young reporter tried asking one last question. Ozzy, people will call this charity work. What do you want them to say about it? Ozzy looked back at the charred remains of the house, the glow of fire trucks painting his face in orange light. I don't want Em to say anything, he said quietly. I just want Em to do something when it's their turn. And with that, he placed his arm gently around Clara and Emma, guiding them toward the waiting car. The night that began with tragedy was ending with hope, all because one man decided that fame meant nothing. If it didn't stand for compassion, the sun had set, but the town still burned with tension. Not from the flames that had destroyed the little girl's home. Those were gone, but from the anger that still lingered in the air. Ozzy Osbourne stood outside the remains of the house, his black coat fluttering in the night wind, the smell of smoke mixed with silence. Only a few flashing police lights remained. He looked at the girl, sitting quietly on the hood of a firefighter's truck, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she refused to look away from what was left of her home. Ozzy clenched his fists. He'd seen pain before, in fame, in loss, in addiction, but this was different. This was pure injustice. A police officer approached him hesitantly. Mr. Osbourne, we have identified the suspects. Local kids about 15, 16, but Ozzy raised an eyebrow. But what? They're from respected families in town. We're not sure yet if we'll press charges. That sentence hit him harder than any guitar riff ever could. He turned slowly, disbelief spreading across his face. So, because their parents have money, Ozzy said softly, a little girl loses her home, and no one's held responsible. The officer shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated, sir. No, Ozzy replied, voice low and firm. It's simple. Right and wrong usually are. The officer couldn't look him in the eyes. Later that night, Ozzy returned to his hotel, but he couldn't sleep. The girl's words echoed in his mind. They burned my house down. He turned on the TV. Every news channel was talking about the fire. Reporters called it a tragic local accident. Accident. No, he knew better. The next morning, Ozzy walked straight into the town hall. Cameras followed him, reporters swarming outside. But he didn't come for attention. He came for truth. He stepped up to the microphone during the emergency meeting. The room fell silent. Everyone expected the rock star to stay quiet, to send a donation and move on. But Ozzy's voice, rough yet powerful, filled the hall. I've been called many things in my life. Wild, crazy, even dangerous. But what I saw yesterday, that was real danger. The danger of people turning their backs on what's right. Every camera focused on him. The mayor shifted nervously in his seat. Ozzy continued, his tone growing stronger. A child's home was burned down because a few spoiled kids thought it was funny. And now, because their parents have money and connections, justice is being delayed. If we start excusing cruelty, we raise a generation that feels nothing. If we teach kids that pain has no consequence, they'll grow up believing hearts are disposable. You could hear a pin drop. Even the police chief looked down. That little girl didn't just lose her home. She lost her safety, her trust in people, and if we let this slide we lose something too. He paused. Look straight into the cameras. I don't care who you are, famous, rich, or ordinary. If you hurt others and walk away laughing, then the problem isn't the fire, it's the coldness in your heart. The hall erupted into quiet murmurs. Some were shocked, some ashamed. Ozzy ended with a final line that would echo far beyond that room. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about reminding the world that kindness still matters and that doing the right thing isn't optional. Then he stepped away. No applause, no drama, just the truth. Left hanging in the air like smoke after a storm, that speech spread like wildfire. By evening, clips of Ozzy's words flooded social media. Hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #Ozzy stands for right began trending. People across the world were inspired not by a celebrity's fame, but by his courage to speak when others stayed silent. Back in that small town, the police had no choice but to reopen the case. And for the first time in a long while, the little girl smiled. The next morning, the town awoke to a sense of purpose. The fire had left devastation behind, but Ozzy Osbourne's presence had ignited hope. Word spread fast. The rock legend himself had promised to help rebuild the little girl's home. Volunteers began arriving before the sun had even fully risen. Local construction crews, carpenters, painters, and even students from nearby schools offered their hands. Some brought tools, others brought donations of furniture, clothes, and toys. The air, once heavy with smoke and fear, now buzzed with energy and determination. People who had previously watched from the sidelines now rolled up their sleeves. Inspired by Ozzy's example, Ozzy didn't seek the spotlight. Instead, he moved quietly among the volunteers, greeting everyone with a nod and a smile. He crouched down to speak to the little girl, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Look at all these people helping," he said softly. "Your home is going to be beautiful again, and you're not alone." The girl's eyes, red and puffy from the previous day's trauma, lit up. "Really, Ozzy?" she whispered. "Absolutely," he replied. "We're going to make it better than before." By noon, the roof had been repaired, the walls freshly painted, and a small garden was being replanted. Neighbors who had once ignored the family's struggles now offered tea and sandwiches to the workers. The community's collective effort turned into a celebration of resilience. Even the reporters who had been documenting the tragedy paused, realizing this was a story of hope, not despair. Ozzy oversaw the placement of furniture donated by fans from around the world. He personally lifted boxes of clothes into the living room, carefully arranging them for the mother and her children. Every act, however small, radiated care and respect. He spoke little, but every word mattered. At one point, the little girl's mother pulled Ozzy aside, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you. We had nothing left." Ozzy shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me. Today is about all of us standing up for what's right. No one should have to lose their home, especially not a child." By evening, the home had been completely restored. The front door, once charred and blackened, now gleamed freshly painted. Windows sparkled, curtains danced in the gentle breeze, and the smell of fresh paint and flowers filled the air. The little girl ran through each room, her laughter bouncing off the walls, replacing the fear that had once lingered there. Before leaving, Ozzy held a small ribbon-cutting ceremony. He handed the scissors to the little girl, letting her take the first cut. Cameras flashed, not to glorify him, but to capture the joy and rebirth of a family. As the ribbon fell away, the crowd erupted in applause. Ozzy stepped back quietly, letting the moment belong entirely to them. He knew this was bigger than fame. It was about humanity, compassion, and the simple truth that one person's kindness can spark a community's courage. That day, the little girl went to bed in her new home for the first time in what felt like forever. Safe, loved, and surrounded by a town that had learned what true solidarity looks like. Even Ozzy, a man who had faced his own battles, couldn't help but smile quietly. Sometimes, he thought, the loudest music isn't on stage, it's the sound of a community coming together to rebuild hope. The morning sun shone gently over the small town, casting long shadows across the streets that had only days before witnessed smoke and chaos. The rebuilt house now stood proudly, freshly painted, its windows sparkling in the light, and the air smelled faintly of paint and hope. Ozzy Osbourne arrived quietly, wearing his signature sunglasses and a black leather jacket, but the celebrity aura didn't matter to anyone, not to the girl, not to her mother, and certainly not to the crowd that had gathered. This was a moment of human connection, of redemption and justice, and for once, fame took a back seat. The little girl ran toward Ozzy, a shy but bright smile on her face. She clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes shone with gratitude and hope. Ozzy knelt down to meet her at eye level. "No, sweetheart. Thank you for letting me help," he said softly. His usual rock star persona had melted away, leaving only a man who had witnessed pain and chosen to fight for kindness. "You're stronger than most adults I know. Don't ever forget that." Her mother approached, tears in her eyes, and hugged him tightly. "I don't even have words. You've saved more than our house, Ozzy. You've saved our faith in people." Around them, townspeople who had once whispered and gossiped now stood silently, some with tears of their own. Volunteers who had helped rebuild the home exchanged glances of pride. Local reporters, who had covered the chaos, lowered their cameras in respect. This wasn't just a story about a burned-down house. It was about courage, community, and one man refusing to let injustice slide. Ozzy stood slowly, facing the crowd that had assembled. He didn't raise his voice, but his words carried weight far heavier than any microphone or spotlight could give them. "Today," he said, "we saw what happens when cruelty is ignored, but we also saw what happens when we choose to act. Kindness isn't weakness. Standing up for someone else isn't a favor, it's our responsibility. Each of us has the power to change lives, to heal wounds that society sometimes refuses to notice, and that is something that will last longer than fame, money, or even music." A hush fell over the crowd. Cameras recorded silently. Social media streams were already lighting up with photos and videos of the rebuilt home, of the little girl smiling, of Ozzy speaking from the heart. Within hours, clips went viral, shared by millions worldwide. Hashtags like #KindnessWins, #OzzyCares, and #RebuildHope began trending across multiple platforms. Even those who had doubted his intentions were moved. People from distant countries sent letters, donations, and messages of support to the family. The bullies' families issued public apologies. Local authorities, once passive, now pledged to monitor the community more responsibly. Ozzy didn't linger for long. As he walked away, the little girl waved, shouting, "Goodbye, Ozzy. Thank you." He raised his hand in a casual salute and smiled, but the message remained loud, clear, and unshakable. Injustice cannot stand when people choose compassion over indifference. In that day, in a quiet town that had witnessed pain, destruction, and fear, the power of kindness, amplified by one man who refused to ignore suffering, changed lives forever. If you believe kindness can change the world, type heart in the comments, share this story, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.